One take I keep seeing when talking about Russia and their economy is that I see a lot of contrarians making this big talking point about the fact that the ruble, the Russian currency, I guess it's stronger than ever. So this is their big talking point. Oh, well, the ruble is strong, so are the sanctions really doing much? Are they really having an impact on Russia? I mean, just think about this. All right, well, why don't we look into this for a second? So this is a story from CBS News from June 28th of this year, written by Irina Ivanova, about how Russia's ruble is the strongest currency in the world this year. And it talks about why. It mentions how the ruble recovered due to soaring commodity prices, but also because of further economic controls imposed by the state, saying that Russia's central bank has also propped up the ruble with strict capital controls that make it harder to convert it into other currencies. That includes a ban on foreign holders of Russian stock and bonds taking dividend payments out of the country. That used to be quite a significant source of outflows for currency from Russia. Now that channel is closed, says Tatiana Orlova, who I think is an economics expert from Oxford University. Yeah, Oxford Economics. Meanwhile, Russian exporters are required to convert half of their excess revenues into rubles, creating a demand for the currency. So it sounds like the government, controls by the government, are stimulating demand in this currency, which is a reason why it appears so strong. The conversion requirement was 80% until the end of May, when it dropped to 50%. On top of that, Orlova noted, it is extremely difficult for foreign companies to sell their Russian investments, another obstacle to capital flight. Quote, although we are seeing these announcements that Western companies are leaving Russia, quite often they simply hand over their stakes to their local partners. It does not actually mean they are being paid a fair price for their stakes, so they are not moving large amounts of cash from the country, she said. All of these factors are creating demand for rubles, boosting the currency's value. Quote, while this is not a free market determined exchange rate, ruble stability is at the same time real in the sense that it is driven by Russia's all-time high current account inflows. Ilana Rybakova, deputy chief economist at the Institute of International Finance, said via email. Article goes on to talk about how Russia is still feeling the pain, saying that the ruble's rally has created some problems for Russia's central bank, which has taken steps to bring its currency closer to historic levels, including loosening capital controls and lowering interest rates. Going on to say a strong currency does not mean that Russia is immune to economic pain, however. Although the ruble's bounce back and the strength of Russia's oil exports have temporarily cushioned the economy from sanctions, the effect is likely to be short-term, experts say. One sign the Russian economy remains under severe pressure is that inflation in Russia is more than double the rate of the United States. That's creating pressure for Russians to move their money out of the country, said Frankel of the Harvard Kennedy School. Quote, the temptation to get assets out of Russia for Russian citizens to find a way around the controls will grow, especially with the inflation rate now as high as it has shot up, he said. Likewise, Russia's default on more than $100 million in interest payments to foreign bondholders over the weekend is another sign of its growing international isolation. Russia had the funds to make these scheduled payments, but the U.S. Treasury Department blocked the country's ability to service its debt through American banks. And then there's this article from Time magazine titled, Russia Privately Warns of Deep and Prolonged Economic Damage.
Uh-oh, spaghetti.
How is that possible? I thought the ruble was so strong. This was actually by Bloomberg, put up on September 6th in Time magazine, saying Russia may face a longer and deeper recession as the impact of U.S. and European sanctions spreads, handicapping sectors of the economy that has relied on for years to power its economy, according to an internal report prepared for the government. The document, the result of months of work by officials and experts trying to assess the true impact of Russia's economic isolation due to President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, paints a far more dire picture than officials usually do in their upbeat public announcements. Bloomberg viewed a copy of the report drafted for a closed-door meeting of top officials on August 30th. People familiar with the deliberations confirmed its authenticity. Two of the three scenarios in the report show the contraction accelerating next year, with the economy returning to the pre-war level only at the end of the decade or later. The inertial one sees the economy bottoming out next year,
Oh, spaghetti-o!
8.3% below the 2021 level, while the stress scenario puts the low in 2024 at roughly 12% under last year's level. How is this possible? I keep seeing contrarians make this point about how the ruble is so strong. All the scenarios see the pressure of sanctions intensifying, with more countries likely to join them. Europe's sharp turn away from Russian oil and gas may also hit the Kremlin's ability to supply its own market, the report said. Beyond the restrictions themselves, which cover about a quarter of imports and exports, the report details how Russia now faces a blockade that has affected practically all forms of transport, further cutting off the country's economy. Technological and financial curbs add to the pressure. The report estimates as many as 200,000 IT specialists may leave the country by 2025, the first official forecast of the widening brain drain. So yeah, like I said, Russia, we might be seeing a massive brain drain going on with Russia at the moment, which is not good for the long-term health and prosperity of Russia. But don't worry, guys, that ruble is really strong. Publicly, officials say the hit from sanctions has been less than feared, with the contraction possibly less than 3% this year and even less in 2023. Outside economists have also adjusted the outlooks for this year, backing off initial forecasts of a deep recession as the economy has held up better than expected. A fall in Russian exports. The document calls for a draft of measures to support the economy and further ease the impact of the restrictions in order to get the economy recovering to pre-war levels in 2024 and growing steadily after that. So what is that? Another 15 months? Hold tight, guys. It's only going to be another 15 months. But the steps include many of the same measures to stimulate investment that the government has touted over the last decade, when growth largely stagnated even without the sanctions. That's another thing worth mentioning, is that the Russian economy wasn't really doing great even before the invasion. If you look at 2019 numbers, the Russian economy was smaller than the economy of a country like Italy, which has roughly less than half of the population as Russia. Much smaller. I think Italy has far fewer natural resources like Russia. So it's not like the Russian economy was doing great prior to this invasion, but it seems like it's in for some hard times. Asked about the Bloomberg report on Tuesday in Vladivostok, Economy Minister Maxim Reshetnikov called the Look, I'm probably going to mess up some of these names.
Well, excuse me, princess.
Call the forecasts analytical estimates that we use to calculate what would happen if we don't resist, don't do anything, according to TASS. Over the next year or two, the report warns of a reduced production volumes in a range of export-oriented sectors, from oil and gas to metals, chemicals, and wood products. While some rebound is possible later, these sectors will cease to be the drivers of the economy. A full cutoff of gas to Europe, Russia's main export market, could cost as much as 400 billion rubles, roughly $6.6 billion a year, 1 year in lost tax revenues, according to the report. It will not be possible to fully compensate the lost sales with new export markets, even in the medium term. Russia's oil sector hit. As a result, output will have to be reduced, threatening Kremlin goals for expanding domestic gas supplies, the report said. The lack of technology needed for liquefied natural gas plants is critical and may hamper efforts to build new ones. Europe's plans to stop importing Russian oil products, about 55% of exports went there last year, could trigger sharp cuts in production, leaving the domestic market short of fuel as well. Metal producers are losing $5.7 billion a year from restrictions, the report said. So this is according to the economic experts in Russia when they were giving reports to the government. In case anyone is worried this is some neoliberal propaganda. If the world economy slips into a recession, the report warns, Russia could see exports cut off even further as it becomes a swing supplier on global markets, with demand for its products disappearing first. That could trigger a plunge in the ruble. A plunge in the ruble.
Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs.
All this talk about the ruble being strong, so strong. Looks like it might not stay strong for very long. That could trigger a plunge in the ruble and a spike in inflation. Don't worry though. I guess if Russia gets even worse inflation, going back to the CBS article, they're already dealing with twice the amount of inflation that we're seeing in the United States. But if they get more inflation, I guess they can just they can just blame it on greedy businesses, you guys. On the import side, the main short-term risk is the suspension of production due to a lack of imported raw materials and components. Over the longer term, the inability to repair imported equipment could permanently limit growth, the report said. Critical imports run out. There are simply no alternative suppliers for some critical imports. Even in the farm sector, where the Kremlin has touted its efforts at replacing foreign supplies, dependence on key inputs could force Russians to reduce their food consumption as supplies dwindle, according to the report. Restrictions on access to Western technology may push Russia a generation or two behind current standards as it is forced to rely on less advanced alternatives from China and Southeast Asia. The report warns that sanctions will also force the government to revise a range of the development targets that Putin had set out before the war, including those for boosting population growth and life expectancy. On a sectorial basis, the report details the breadth of the hit from sanctions. Agriculture. Fully 99% of poultry production and 30% of Holstein dairy cattle output depends on imports. Seeds for staples like sugar beets, and potatoes are also mostly brought in from outside the country, as are fish feeds and amino acids. Remember, this is one of the reasons why the Sri Lanka economy collapsed a few months ago, was due to restrictions on imports for agriculture. And if Russia is also cut off from agricultural imports, that might be pretty disastrous for the people in Russia. Aviation. 95% of passenger volume is carried on foreign-made planes, and the lack of access to imported spare parts could lead the fleet to shrink as they go out of service. Machine building. Only 30% of machine tools are Russian-made, and local industry does not have the capacity to cover rising demand. Pharmaceuticals. About 80% of domestic production relies on imported. Who really needs pharmaceuticals? It really, isn't it good that big pharma gets choked off? transport, EU restrictions have tripled the cost for road shipments, communications, and IT. Restrictions on SIM cards could leave Russia short of them by 2025, while its telecommunications sector may fall 5 years behind world leaders in 2022. Then we have this article that was put up on CNBC in September 21st of 2022, written by Elliot Smith. Path to Oblivion. Ukraine military gains could deepen Russia's economic problems. We'll start here. The EIU is projecting a Russian GDP contraction of 6.2% this year and 4.1% next year, which Demarais said was huge by both historical and international standards. Russia did not experience a recession when it was first placed under Western sanctions in 2014. Iran, which was entirely cut off from SWIFT in 2012, something that has not happened to Russia yet, experienced a recession of only around 4.4% of that year. Statistics are scarce on the true state of the Russian economy, with the Kremlin keeping its cards relatively close to its chest. However, Bloomberg reported earlier this month, citing internal documents, that Russian officials are fearing a much deeper and more persistent economic downturn than public assertions suggest. Putin repeatedly claimed that his country's economy is coping with Western sanctions, while Russia's first deputy prime minister, Andrei Belousov, said last month that inflation will come around 12 to 13% in 2022, far below the gloomiest projections offered by global economists earlier in the year. Russian GDP contracted by 4% in the second quarter of this year, according to state statistics service Rosstat, and Russia upped its economic forecast earlier this month, now projecting a contraction of 2.9% in 2022 and 0.9% in 2023, before returning to 2.6% growth in 2024. Now, all of the people, all of the contrarians that like to dive on grenades for Putin and this fucking invasion and choose to die on this landfill and bring up these contrarian talking points, but what about the strong ruble? If this shit were happening under Biden, I imagine these same people would be sounding the alarms, and you could say rightfully so. I mean, people made a big fuss about how a lot of people are suddenly changing the definition of recession because the United States got back-to-back quarters of GDP contraction, which used to be the definition of an economic recession. But hey, if it's Putin, if it's Russia, then it's, well, what about the strong ruble? However, Demarais argued that all visible data point to a collapse in domestic consumption, double-digit inflation, and shrinking investment, with a withdrawal of 1,000 Western firms also likely to have implications for employment and access to innovation. Yet the real impact of sanctions on Russia will be felt mostly in the long term. In particular, sanctions will restrict Russia's ability to explore and develop new energy fields, especially in the Arctic region. Because Western penalties financing and development of these fields will become almost impossible. In addition, U.S. sanctions will make the export of required technology to Russia impossible. Sanctions are here to stay. In her State of the Union address last week, European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen lauded the impact of EU sanctions, claiming that Russia's financial sector is on life support. We have cut off 3/4 of Russia's banking sector from international markets. Nearly 1,000 international companies have left the country. Keep in mind, none of this fucking happens if Putin just minds his own business, at least when it comes to international affairs, and decides to not invade his neighbors, his sovereign neighbors. But I guess it's all NATO's fault, you guys.
Blow it out your ass.
The production of cars fell by 3/4 compared to last year. Aeroflot is grounding planes because there are no more spare parts. The Russian military is taking chips from dishwashers and refrigerators to fix their military hardware because they ran out of semiconductors. Russia's industry is in tatters. But what about the strong ruble, you guys?
You absolutely suck!
She added that the Kremlin had put Russia's economy on that path to oblivion and vowed that sanctions were here to stay. This is the first of us to show resolve, not appeasement. Good for the EU. You know, there's a lot to not like about the EU, if I'm being honest. There's a lot to not like about the EU, but imposing sanctions on a hostile regime that is invading its neighbors and has a history of invading its neighbors, yeah, appeasement is not a good strategy. As the Kremlin scrambles to strengthen security ties, having been shunned by the West, a top Russian official stated on a visit to Beijing last week that Moscow sees deepening strategic ties with China as a key policy aim. Putin also met with Chinese President Xi Jinping, or as I like to call him, Shinny the Jinpu, in Uzbekistan last week, as the two countries touted a no-limits relationship. However, several commentators have noted that Russia's bargaining power on the world stage wanes. China will hold most of the cards as the two superpowers attempted to cement further cooperation. In the long term, China will be the sole economic alternative for Russia to turn to, but this process will be tricky too, as China will remain wary of becoming overdependent on Russian commodities. Not to mention that the Chinese economy is kind of in trouble at this point. It hasn't been doing too well, especially since embracing this goofy-ass zero COVID policy, where they lock down entire cities of tens of millions of people, some of which have tens of millions of people, large industrial and production centers just shut down because we can't allow even one case of COVID in China. Not to mention its hostility and its further economic restrictions have demoralized whatever entrepreneurial and innovative spirit existed in communist China. But wait, there's more. I was looking into some YouTubers, some streamers who are from Russia, live in Russia, and they've been talking about this. This is from a YouTuber named Kitten Yulia. And she put up a video titled Russian Life Under Sanctions, in parentheses, very poor. This was just put up a few weeks ago. Actually, I should probably start with this one. This is from Ellie from Russia. This was put up 6 months ago. She put up a video about life in Russia under sanctions. She even does a portion where she talks about grocery prices are insanely high after sanctions. And if you compare this with this video, it seems like they've only gotten worse. But I think this part of the video is more interesting, where she talks about unemployment rising.
Not being able to buy some brands when such things truly... Well, you've seen that many international companies...
Actually, it's on... I put it on too fast.
...stopped working in Russia. But I can't really care about some... like not being able to buy some brands.
Yeah, so she talks about the various brands that have left Russia. I think at one point she, when she's grocery shopping, she shows that the bottles of Coca-Cola on the shelves are like they're disappearing. Not only have they gone up in price, but she's like, oh, we're about to do without Coca-Cola. Which, yeah, you could take this this mentality of, does anybody really need Coca-Cola?
Blow it out your ass.
Yes! If it hasn't been clear, I am a soda connoisseur. I like a healthy range of options when it comes to my caffeinated and carbonated beverages. Sometimes I enjoy Diet Mountain Dew. Sometimes I enjoy Zero Sugar Sunkist, Diet Pepsi, Diet Coke, sugar-free A&W cream soda. I love as many options as I can get my hands on. So if this were me in Russia and I were a regular consumer of, say, Coca-Cola products, and then suddenly, poof, they're gone because my piece of shit dictator of a leader decided to invade the country's neighbors in the name of national prestige or whatever.
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
Then I'd be pretty pissed off. Not to mention the various other brands. But she says, like, it's not a big deal for me. Yeah, it sucks, but it doesn't really bother me that much. But I'm more interested and concerned about the people that will lose their jobs as a result of this.
When such things happen in the world. But what bothers me is how many people are gonna lose their jobs. Because it's not only this actual store where people worked inside that are gonna lose their jobs, but also the delivery man, for example, the marketing team, management team, everyone. So many people are losing their jobs, whereas the prices for food and everything are becoming higher. I myself also lost all my income from YouTube because now it's impossible to transfer money to Russia.
So she can't even make money off of YouTube anymore. And if you look at her channel, she has almost 350,000 subscribers. This video has over 2 million views. It's probably a lot of money that she's missing out on because of her fucking leader invading his neighbors. But it's really NATO's fault.
Blow it out your ass.
Meanwhile, the people in Russia that Putin allegedly is supposed to govern on their behalf, they are suffering as a consequence of his actions, of his antics, of his ambitions, of making Mother Russia stronger. The ruble so strong.
And even though I have my student Italian bank card.
So prices are going up, options are becoming more scarce, and people are losing their jobs, losing sources of revenue. But don't worry, guys, that ruble is so strong.
I can't link it to YouTube because I pay taxes in Russia. I can't buy the lenses for my camera now because they just finished in Russia. There are no lenses for my camera anymore.
Can't get new parts for her camera.
And even though there was, I wouldn't be able to buy it because it's now 3 times more expensive.
So even if the parts were available, they would be triple in price by this point. The people in Russia are suffering.
I wanted to buy a drone because I lost mine, but now I can't afford it.
And this was 6 months ago, but she's probably, she might have friends, loved ones that are getting conscripted into the military. Many of whom are reportedly not trained, under-equipped, just being sent out to Ukraine for cannon fodder.
Those are just small problems.
But that ruble, you guys, so strong.
That I will be able to resolve in the future, I hope. The most important thing, I hope that peace will return.
She's hoping peace will return. So do I. Then I saw this, I found this one, I think I already mentioned her, Kitten Yulia. I wanted to start with Ellie. Why did I say Eli? Ellie from Russia, because this one was from earlier, 6 months ago. So now we should check out Kitten Yulia. What's life like under sanctions from her perspective?
Next thing, quality and joy of life. I live in Russia. I is smart. And that means I'm depressed as fuck. That's why I have a habit of drinking hot tea with Kinder chocolates while watching something I like. I have been doing this since 2010.
So she likes to drink tea and eat chocolate because life in Russia, I mean, even before the invasion was not good, to say the least. But one of the things that she enjoyed was drinking tea and eating chocolate. Even now, just that tiny enjoyment, I don't mean to belittle it. I'm trying not to. I'm trying to be sympathetic, if I'm being honest here. But even that small enjoyment is becoming more difficult. But the ruble, you guys!
Every single day, it's shitty rainy day, dirt is everywhere, and everything looks like there was an apocalypse. But when I got home, I could suppress the depression with hot tea and Kinder chocolate. Thanks to our geopolitical mastermind, who was the reason of all this happening.
Gotta imagine she's intentionally being somewhat vague when talking about the political mastermind.
You know what I'm talking about. The price for Kinder chocolate.
And give her credit for, speaking about this, given that we know that the Putin regime is not exactly fond of letting critics talk shit about him without consequences.
It increased twice. And what I'm talking about. The price for Kinder chocolate increased twice.
Increased twice.
And I was like, what the f***? It's so expensive. So expensive. But then...
And on top of that, Russians, again, were already not making a lot of money. I think both her and Ellie from Russia have mentioned that, like, most Russians make anywhere between the equivalent of what would be $400 and $600 a month. A month? Imagine trying to survive on $600 a month right now in the United States. And then prices going up, options becoming scarce. But the ruble, you guys.
Chocolate started to disappear. So expensive. But then Kinder chocolate started to disappear in our stores, and it was really hard to find it, or it was super expensive.
So it's either hard to find or very expensive.
I just have nothing else here to be happy about in this hole. Also, I like to spend my free time in IKEA. I was looking at those rooms, at the furniture, and
She likes to go window shopping at IKEA, apparently.
some really cozy stuff for my home. And even I was buying something. IKEA closed too.
Now IKEA is gone. One of the few places that she liked to do, go window shopping at IKEA. It's now gone.
If you ask me, why would I spend my day in IKEA instead of going somewhere else? You forgot that I live in Russia and outside it looks like this.
But that strong ruble, you guys. So strong. Strongest currency. Meanwhile, 1 ruble is worth, like, I think 17 American cents. So strong!
No, thank you. I prefer going to IKEA. All the good stores left this country. Zara, H&M, Adidas, Nike, Apple, Samsung, everything. The car manufacturers left too. So the car lovers here will be mad soon. I bet Russian people will be mad more at the fact that they can't repair the car. And they wouldn't care about the food prices increase. Because here, people care about their car more than about their kids. I'm not joking.
I think she mentions at one point, I don't know if she's going to get to it, but I think she mentions at one point that, like, merely buying a new pair of shoes in Russia, I guess, is like a big deal. Like, that's something you celebrate in Russia. It's like if you buy a new pair of shoes, it's like a huge portion of your income.
I'll tell you more in the video about weird stuff that Russians do. Other things I'm going to talk about is what affected me and not just average people. As you know, I also stream on Twitch. Very good streams, very delicious subscribes. Twitch doesn't pay me anything. Like, I don't get money from Twitch because Russian cards don't work with foreign countries.
So yeah, another commentator online in Russia losing their source of revenue.
Anymore. I cannot buy a subscription anymore. YouTube Music,
can't buy streaming services.
Spotify, streaming services are gone now.
No streaming services.
Apple Pay is gone too.
Remember during the lockdowns in America, like there was like this whole thing of like, well, at least we can just sit home for a couple weeks, take a couple weeks off, maybe catch up on some Netflix shows and movies that you have missed out on over the years. Of course, that got out of control. Didn't justify the lockdowns, by the way. But at least that was something you could take solace with. But Russians can't even enjoy that anymore.
Too. So I'm paying with my physical card like Australopithecus did for 1 million years ago. If you tell me it affected you, but not average people. Average people don't pay for streaming services in there. I'm once again asking you to remember that average people get $300 to $450 a month.
$300 to $450 a month.
And they struggle to buy extra chewing gum. I'm not even talking about streaming services.
Can't even purchase gum either.
The chicken price got 40% more expensive, but not as much as other stuff in the stores. It's because the government pays the meat factories, so they don't have to increase the price. If they do that, we will all starve to death. Communist country experience. Basic food like pasta, rice, potatoes, and other vegetables got 65% more expensive.
65% more expensive for stuff like potatoes and vegetables, 40% more for chicken.
And the electronic stuff.
Doesn't sound like the ruble is that strong, even in Mother Russia.
It's amazing. The washing machine I bought for 30k rubles now costs 55k rubles. iPhone 13, the previous year model, here costs 130k rubles, which is, by the way, almost $3,000. A friendly
So what'd you say?
reminder.
New iPhone now costs $3,000 in Russia?
30k rubles now costs 55k rubles. iPhone 13, the previous year model,
iPhone 14?
here costs 130k rubles, which is, by the way, almost $3,000.
3,000. I think they cost roughly, let me look at, I think they only cost like about 1,000 maybe. Yeah, looks like the iPhone 14 6-inch before trade-in in America is $800. 3,000 in Russia. Such a strong ruble.
A friendly reminder, Russian average monthly salary is $300 up to $450. I think you understand the pattern, right? There are no more good combos in fast food places. Last year I could buy a big combo for 250 rubles with big burger, fries, a drink and stuff like that. Now 250 rubles combo gives you a small cheeseburger that I think is 5 times smaller than the burger last year. 200 milliliters drink and small fries, and that's 250 rubles combo, or $5 combo. Actually, our government is taking care of us so we don't become fat. They are just trying to make it impossible to buy food in the nearest future. Just like in UCCR.
Sounds like Ralphie the Revolutionary when he was talking about how, America and capitalism, yeah, you get more food, but you get more health problems. So it's actually good.
UCCR. So, I think you understand that because of sanctions, Russians became more poor and the quality of
Because of sanctions, Russians became more poor.
life is way worse now. They can't buy anything outside of Russia because our cards are blocked. And we don't have good cheap stores like H&M anymore. Everything is getting more expensive each day. Now I want to show you the prices in stores. And I will show you how much people spend here
Now we're going to go to the grocery store.
on basic stuff and how much they have left out of their salary in their pocket after one visit in the store. Turkey fillet costs $7.
Turkey fillet. So what is this? Ground? No, these are turkey fillet. It looked like deli meat when I first watched this. Was that ground turkey? $7. I think it's like roughly 4 to 5 usually when I buy it these days.
Vegetable oil is $6.
$6 for vegetable oil.
Basic chocolate $3 to $6. Olive oil $10 to $20.
$10 to $20 for olive oil.
Pringles $6.
$6 for a can of Pringles.
Beans $3.
$3 for beans. I buy a lot of canned beans, and it's usually anywhere between $1 and $1.50.
50 cents. Butter $3 to $4. The most basic coffee $10.
$10 for most basic coffee. Usually I can get a lot of coffee for I usually get like the cheap Kroger brand or Folgers and get a lot of that for under $10.
Starbucks coffee $13.
Now in all fairness, Starbucks is usually too pricey.
Milk $3.
That much milk for $3. You usually get a gallon for that in the United States for that much.
cream $4. Let's imagine I got my $300 salary and went to the store. I bought turkey, a basic tomato sauce, butter, some milk, pasta, and chocolate bar with tea. I would spend almost $30 just to buy the most basic food. If I wanted to treat myself and buy some ice cream, maybe juice, chips, I would easily spend $50 on that. Not because I'm a big spender, but because everything here is expensive. So, one visit to the store means I spent minimum 10% of my salary. To feed myself for 1 to maximum 3 days after one visit,
Godless Monkey says, fuck, Russia is so depressing, right? Sorry to like hark on that whole point about the ruble being strong, but I still see it. But think about all of this from a big picture perspective. About all of these losers and clowns who like to, dive on grenades for Putin for whatever reason, blame America first, numbskulls, dipshit contrarians, people who are dying on this fucking landfill. Putin started all of this by invading his sovereign neighbors, Ukraine, which resulted in retaliatory sanctions from more prosperous economies throughout the world. This has made life worse for people under Russia. Putin apparently, a government is supposed to act and govern on the people he governs over. And now as a consequence of his territorial ambitions, the people he governs over, rules over, are now poorer, have a lower quality of life, less choices when they go out to shop, their lives are worse, they're much poorer. Yet you have all these fucking dipshits making this, taking this one cent, what about the strong ruble? Because it went from like 13 cents compared to the US dollar to like, 17 cents compared to the US dollar? Meanwhile, Russian citizens, they're fleeing. Some of them are getting on boats and showing up to Alaska because they don't want to be conscripted and sent off to Ukraine undertrained and under-equipped. People in Russia, they're making fewer dollars. They're losing streams of revenue, income. Their purchasing power has gone down when they go out and shop. And yet we still have idiots making a big deal about what about my strong ruble? But even if the Russian economy was soaring and prospering, which is impossible to do from a war, wars don't lead to economic prosperity. I mean, just think about it. If you're siphoning money from the producers in your country to what? Build bombs so that you can go blow up people in another country? I mean, that's quick spending, quick consumption. Build a bomb, blow it up. Now we need more bombs because the war isn't over yet. Oops. Whereas during peacetime, if that money were left in private hands, that money could be put to productive use. But even if you can make an economic justification, like this would result in greater rewards and economic benefits for Russia, it would not justify invading their sovereign neighbors. And as we can see, that this has had a devastating impact on the on people in Russia and the economy of Russia.